Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Beyond This with me, Zahira Bam Ismail. Today, I'm speaking to someone who literally rewrote the playbook for how we tell stories that we own and for stories that are on the move. Yusuf Omar is synonymous with the narratives of changing and holding our own narratives and mobile journalism. He's the co-founder and CEO of Scene, a global mobile-first storytelling network that trains creators, amplifies overlooked voices, and experiments with the future of immersive media. From frontline reporting to building training programs for local journalists, Yusuf has moved beyond the newsroom to create a platform that asks, who gets to tell the story, and how can these stories be used to create empathy and practical change? Yusuf, welcome to the studios.
I don't know who wrote that intro, but it's a better description than how we describe ourselves. So you got to send me that, and I'll copy and paste it onto our websites and stuff. Thank you so much for the kind welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Yusuf, you known for creating responsible journalism around, but for taking control of our own narrative. We often talk about the fact that as Muslims, as women, as individuals, as Africans, as South Africans, our story is often told from a very biased sense of media. But you stepped back from that and decided to start your own form of journalism. I have to ask, where did that impetus come from? What was the first initial reason for you deciding to hold your own narrative?
I think right back in 2010, when I first wanted to be a journalist, I was disillusioned by the image that traditional media had portrayed of the world. So, for example, the African continent. It was
Yes.
constantly through film and media portrayed as famine, death, disease, child soldiers. And I was like, surely that's not the reality of pure reality of over 1 billion people that call this continent home. And, right back in 2010, I hitchhiked from South Africa to Syria and saw the continent with my own eyes. And it was the opposite. It was full of growth and opportunity and optimism and hope and diversity and creativity and blossoming young economies. And I think that I've seen that trend play out throughout my career. When we finally decided to start our own media organization in 2016, I was working at CNN International at the time. Traditional media were just so out of touch. They didn't think Brexit was going to happen in the UK. They didn't think Trump was going to win in the US. They weren't listening to real people and real stories. And it's because their newsrooms lack so much diversity. They're old white men that are trying to have an understanding of this global interconnected world. And we just realized that there was a better way to do this.
And we've seen that. We've seen a huge change with the way even TikTok has presented the entire presentation of Gaza, how it's changed people's perceptions and opinions. But you've started this a while back. But I have to ask you, what is the line between accessible storytelling and responsible reporting?
Everybody can be a reporter, can be somewhere and report something has happened. But I think journalists and journalism has a series of ethical frameworks that separate fact from fiction, right? So I think that's the line. Anyone can be a reporter, but then there's a team of journalists that need to help curate, aggregate, and make sense of it all.
But you've trained journalists in a number of intense contexts and allowed them to be able to tell their own story. What is one of the moments that from the field that has sat with you or changed the way you've seen things?
I think, for example, during COVID-19, we had such unique access. We had trained a grave digger in New York City who was conducting Muslim funerals to document the realities on the ground of ground zero of the COVID pandemic, right? Where in America, over 1 million people lost their lives. And that for me was a unique perspective into the COVID story. Or in South Sudan, we were able to do stories with children who were refugees who were looking at how teenage pregnancies were on the rise in refugee camps. That's a unique Sudanese story that we had access to. Or in Gaza, we did a film with Ahmed Bunheim, right? Ahmed Alive, where we documented the genocide through the perspective of a travel vlogger. So I think all over the world, we have a really unique vantage point into massive international stories, but through the human lived experience of people on the ground. We're not the organization that's going to speak to the president or the prime minister or the spokesperson. There's enough people to do that. We're about like seeing the world through somebody else's perspective. And I think those examples I shared with you are some of my favorites.
So, you mentioned this in terms of its own perspective. And I think very often when we're watching news reporting, we do want a level of objectivity. But when we're watching scene TV, the part that actually connects us is the empathy, the human connection, seeing it from a lived experience where we can relate to it in some way. Was this strategically thought of? Or is there a thing about holding a level of objectivity? Or do you want people to connect? Because human beings need that form of connection.
We're not impartial or on many stories. We're very opinionated. We're pro Black Lives Matter. We're pro the liberation of the Palestinian people. We are anti-apartheid. We are anti-racism. We make no kind of hesitation about sharing our bias. We have a bias for the truth. We have a bias for social justice. We have a bias for environmental justice. I think specifically to your point, the entire Scene TV cause was built around creating a more empathetic and understanding world. If Vice media is the rock and roll, sex and drugs of journalism, we are the love and empathy and understanding. And the idea that if you can see the world through somebody else's perspective, you will realize that we have more in common than we have apart. And I think the world needs that desperately right now, in a world where traditional media do the opposite. They're divisive, they're polarizing. They say, oh my God, they other people. So it was deeply baked into our DNA that we would create empathy through storytelling.
But being so unapologetic in your identity or the cause of Scene TV and holding so strongly to what you know is being on the right side of history, surely that's had repercussions for you from the general public in terms of your general supporters that would have otherwise supported, because people want to see a colorful narrative that they feel palatable to their audiences.
Yeah, I mean, we catch a lot of critique from all sides, and I think if you are not sometimes getting some kind of hostilities, I suppose, from people around the world, then you might not be doing a job properly as a journalist, right? It comes with the turf, and then as our audience grows and our impact grows, we can expect to face more criticism, and that's fine. I think what's really challenging for us sometimes is, as I mentioned before, we are pro human rights, and that makes it very difficult in 2025 because take for example, like us as a media organization, we will cover Gaza, but we will also cover if, a LGBTQI person is stabbed to death on a bus because of their sexuality. And that is a conundrum where you're going to grow an audience that maybe are not value aligned with the LGBTQI community. And for that reason, they wouldn't want to see that content on the platform. But from our perspective, whether we agree or disagree, or you agree or disagree with somebody's way of living, hate is wrong, right? Physical violence is wrong. Hurting somebody because of who they are is wrong. And I think that's where we find ourselves in a difficult part of the internet, where you're trying to create this more empathetic and understanding world. And we are incredibly progressive on everything, including Palestine, right? But progressive people are not necessarily progressive on the same things. And I think that's a line that we're constantly navigating.
With just coming back, you mentioned Palestine and how you've been in the forefront of this with bringing those stories back to us. You really did put the flotilla mission in the forefront for many people in terms of how you presented it to us. I mean, many people were following your stories. How did that experience shape your thinking about narrative, access, and risk?
Yeah, so we knew very early on that the only form of defense that the flotilla mission had against potential sabotage and attack by the Israelis was visibility, and making it so viral and so much international attention that it would be a political disaster for Israel to compromise this mission, or even worse, kill people. Having said that, Israel seems to have little to no regard for their international reputation. So, all bets are off. So we as storytellers and as journalists and media felt a huge responsibility to bring visibility to this mission, as a form of defense, in the same way that young Palestinians on the ground documenting the genocide of their people use their mobile cameras as a sword, right? They say if the pen was mightier than the sword, the mobile phone is an atomic agent of change to bring accountability and eyewitness accounts to what's happening on the ground.
So in that, and just following from that, what does it mean to you when we talk about decolonizing the media? Because Scene TV and what you've brought to all of us is the ability for us to hold our own agency and to hold our narrative without other people describing or telling us who we are and who we should be.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by your research and interview skills, by the way. This is one of the better conversations I've had in terms of understanding what we're trying to do here. So we are, us as a community, and I'm speaking now to 2 billion Muslims, but I'm also speaking to people of color around the world. We are so out of control when it comes to media. The other side, the Zionists, have been investing in media for the last 100 years. They have dehumanized Arab populations and Muslims and Palestinians more specifically, and that has enabled consent for their genocide, where they've been able to view certain parts of the world purely through the perspective of counterterrorism and security, so that when they end up killing us, they're able to justify it. Like, hey, these people are going to grow up to be terrorists, so let us kill them before they kill you.
Yeah.
So the stakes are so high that we break this colonial media system. And it's not just the publishers, right? And the publishers are like fiercely trying to protect the old guard. That's why they call pro-Palestine protesters pro-Hamas, right? BBC literally did that on a live broadcast. That's why the New York Times memorandum for their staff not to use words like occupation, apartheid, Palestine, right? This is a colonial system that is deeply enshrined into their journalism. Even worse, their journalists believe the stuff that they put out. So there's that side of things. But then there's also a lack of distribution. We don't own Netflix or Amazon or Hulu or Disney or Meta or TikTok or any of these platforms. So even if we create good content, even if we put out the truth, we risk shadow bans and censorship and all this content. So we have a problem of a lack of production capacity, and we have a lack of distribution capacity. And this means that, unfortunately, they tell our stories for us. They frame us as evil. They frame us as dangerous. Malcolm X had this saying, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you believing that the oppressed are the oppressor and the oppressed are the oppressed. And that has never been more true than what we're seeing today in Gaza and in other parts of the world. How did suddenly an old white man become the victim in the United States of America, which led to the MAGA movement? And we're seeing the same thing in the UK with Nigel Farage. And, white people in the UK have suddenly become the victims. So decolonialism of the media is critical. But unfortunately, our community view media and storytelling often as like cute, as like fluff, as like, oh yeah, that's really nice. And we spend our money on soup kitchens and refugee camps and all that kind of stuff. And that charity stuff is important. And yes, it potentially preserves lives, but it doesn't bring about structural change. It doesn't change the way people vote. It doesn't change the way we make our consumer purchases. It doesn't end an occupation. It doesn't end an apartheid system. No, that involves decolonializing the media, educating billions of people around the world about the realities. That's how we bring about real change. That's how we gain real power and influence. That's how we really see the social justice that we require for marginalized people all over the world. It is the singular most important thing in the world right now. And with the advent of generative AI and the ability for them to contrive and manipulate and create fake and false information and put words in people's mouths, they are literally going to start wars. And that's why this is the big bet. We all need to get behind media and decolonializing people's minds, and that happens through storytelling.
And I think you're so spot on, because very often, like you're saying, we're doing our parts in the charity, we're doing our parts, but we need to be rather more proactive rather than reactive, and stop putting band-aids onto wounds that are gashing. We need to be in the forefront of it and making sure the surgeons are ahead of its time. Because I often find, like you rightfully said, we've got the content, we've got phenomenal people telling their own stories, but we're not even controlling those platforms where it should be. And far more funding needs to go into that for us to be able to hold that narrative strongly. Yusuf, you speak about
Right.
AR.
So I mean, just
Yeah,
just on your point, real quick, like,
yeah.
how do we create a million more podcasts like yours with incredible, smart, intellectual, passionate young Muslim women around the world, or not even Muslim women, just value aligned people? How do we empower many, many more scene TVs? Like, that's where it's at. It's about a decentralized network of value aligned storytellers who have the skills, who are incredibly passionate and hardworking, but just need that level up. And sometimes that's funding, sometimes that's like administration, sometimes that's like how to go from a one woman or one man band storyteller to a larger media organization. Like, we have so much capital as an ummah. We have so many resources. And if we just deploy it, there is no reason why we can't build the next CNN, the next Fox, the next social media platforms. It's just about connecting these incredible people in the ummah who have got great ideas and are executing on those ideas and putting rocket fuel behind them. And not as a charity, like not drip feeding them, the point where they have sustainable business models like we do, right? We've generated $11 billion on social media publishing. Like, we are a viable media business. We don't need handouts. We don't need to beg for the next grant funding or anything like that. So it can be done and it will be done, but it just involves connecting the dots between the finances and the capital and the people that are really gaining traction, like yourselves. And, you know, you met Mohammed Galal, Thinking Muslim, and so many others. There's so many great products that exist today. Yaqeen. And it's just about like taking them to the next level and identifying the next layer of those creators and storytellers.
That's exactly what we were talking about. It's about aggregating the phenomenal powers that we have within our communities to be able to make our narratives a lot stronger. Because if we understand the power we hold together, those storytelling moments become far more powerful and far more far-reaching for us as a community as a whole. But what I want to ask you about, you speak a lot about AR and immersive media. How is that going to change who tells the stories and how audiences receive the truth?
It's huge. It's huge. It's a once in a generation opportunity for the Ummah to finally own a part of the future. We missed Web 1. We don't own AOL or any of those legacy platforms, Amazon. We missed Web 2. We don't own Meta or TikTok or these social media platforms. But there is a new generation of the internet that is developing, that is moving from the mobile phone being the primary input technology to headsets and glasses like the one I'm wearing, right? So the AR space is huge. It's the idea of overlaying the internet onto the physical world, right? So you walk around and you have a pair of glasses and you see stories everywhere. And we've done some really cool stuff in that space. For example, in Cape Town, South Africa, we took the colonial Louis Botha statue, which is very controversial, and a lot of Black South Africans have called to pull it down because it effectively celebrates a racist massacred many Black people across this continent. And we said, okay, what if we give it more information? So basically, you can walk up to it, point your phone at it, or look at it with a pair of glasses, and it comes to life. And it says, I was Louis Botha. I was a fantastic South African prime minister. And then his horse wakes up and starts fact checking him and says, "Nah, man, you're a racist." And they debate his legacy. So that's where storytelling is going. It's so exciting. And like, again, like, we as an ummah have the ideas, we know where the puck is going, we can see where the future of media is going, and we can own that future. We can own that future before anyone else does.
And I think that's so important for us, for anyone watching this, to understand what we also need to be putting out there, what we need to be financially backing, because these are the stories that are going to hold not just for now, but for generations to come. And let's not miss this bus and wait for the next one after this is already done and someone's taken control of our narrative. Yusuf, with the stories that you get, what matrix do you actually matter to you when you decide which stories should be amplified?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're really good at identifying like a 30-second moment on TikTok or Instagram Reels where somebody has got a really unique lived experience, which makes people in the comment section say, oh, I never thought about it that way. Right.
Mm.
I love that. That's my favorite key performance indicator or result when I see somebody change their mind. Changing a mind is hard, right? Like
Yeah.
it challenges everything you knew about a subject matter. I mean, the ultimate for that is when we have Zionists and they come across the line and see the truth and recognize the
Yeah.
rights of a Palestinian to exist and to thrive. So that's like really what I search for. And then we're in the business of basically finding that little 30-second moment and saying, there's something here. We can turn this into a 3-minute film, a 5-minute film, a 1-hour film, tour it in cinemas around the world. Give the person the tools to tell their story. But yeah, in answer to your question, it's not vanity metrics for me. It's not views and likes and shares. It's behavioral change. It's narrative change. It's somebody changing their mind about a subject matter.
Mm. So Scene TV, without a doubt, takes a very solution-based approach, and you come in with a huge amount of energy. You get that on-screen, off-screen from you. You share it with great optimism. Have you ever gotten criticism for being too optimistic, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think even on the flotilla, for example, there is a camp of people that might say that Yusuf's voice was loud and optimistic about arriving in Gaza. I think we all have a different role to play. I think you have a Mehdi Hassan of the world who is a heavyweight boxer to defend and fiercely debate. I think you have a Muhammad Jalal and Sami Hamdi, who are deep thinkers and provide political analysis and commentary. I think we have somebody like yourself who is able to really go like researched and insightful and thought-provoking questions. And then you have a role for like a Yusuf Omar and a Scene TV who are speaking to a 13 to 24-year-old in America who are not Muslim, who are not from the same background as us. 99% of our audience are not Muslim. They're not, they're young white Americans often. So we all have a different role to play. And I think if people understood that, then they might understand how deliberate we are about the tone that we use, about the style that we tell stories in. And does that mean we don't have range? No, we do, like our documentaries, the Bistan documentary, Ahmed Alive, longer films, deeper films. For me, it's like it's if you imagine a inverted pyramid, okay, so an upside down pyramid, you kind of want to have the biggest, simplest, most viral, for lack of a better word, clickbaity way to get people into your ecosystem. And then you want to funnel them down into deeper and more meaningful layers of content. So I might get you in with a 30-second flashy video, and then you might stick around for the 1 minute, and then you might join us for the 3-minute, and then you might watch a 10-minute with us, and then you might watch a 30-minute documentary with us, and then you might have an immersive experience where you try on a headset. And then you might attend one of our events and do a cooking class, and learn about Palestinian culinary, etc. So it's very much like a conventional marketing funnel, and I think if people understand that, then they understand, okay, what you're watching on Instagram or TikTok, which might be seen as slightly loud and optimistic and hopeful, and I am all those things too, by the way, is a funnel into the deeper, more insightful commentary. And also, I mean, on the optimism point and the hope and that, like, if we are not hopeful, like, what is there left to live for?
That's it.
I think, yeah.
No, and I love the fact that there's strategy behind it and the way you've thought it out. And the truth of it is that optimism is what pulls people into actually watching all of that, because we're tired of just being calm and complacent in it. We love seeing the enthusiasm around the stories because it does give hope to a lot of people around as well. But I have to ask you, what is
But it's also not, it's not false.
Yes.
Like, my optimism around Palestine is very real. Like, Palestine, despite, potentially hundreds of thousands of people being killed in this genocide, Palestine has never been more free. There has never been more people around the world that are familiar with the liberation struggle. There's never been more Americans that are in solidarity with Palestine, including young Jewish Americans who are on the front lines of these protests. Like, there is a million reasons to be optimistic about Palestine right now. There is a million reasons to believe that Palestine is on the brink of something in the same way that South Africa was in the late 80s and early 90s. I think people are pessimistic and negative because they're so zoomed in on the moment now, on the massacre now. But if you zoom out and you look at the context and you really study like sentiment analysis, like we are progressing in wild and incredible ways that none of us could have ever imagined.
And I think that's the thing. We'll always have people who always see the glass as half full or half empty, and you get to choose the way you look at it. But I think we're at a time where people want to hold on to hope. You're right. Well, let's look at the good things. It's the biggest time we've seen people have a public change of opinion, the most talked about conversations, and we're hoping it doesn't just stop in Gaza. We see it in Sudan, and we see it in Congo, and wherever else we see these difficulties. But Yusuf, what has been the one decision that you've made for Scene TV that has almost kept you awake? Because the truth of it is, it can't always be smooth flowing or 100% okay. What has there been that decision, whether good or bad, that has made you lose a bit of sleep?
I've never said this before publicly. I think before October 7th, some of the work that we were doing is not necessarily aligned with the values that we have today. It is very, very difficult to run an independent media organization that can pay salaries and that kind of stuff. And in the acquisition of more views and likes and shares, which then equal revenue on social media platforms like Facebook and Snapchat, you unfortunately can find yourself ending up in a place that is can be seen as frivolous, can be seen as even approaching. It's a really slippery slope to content that is not aligned with our tradition and our value system. And I think that is something that I'm very conscious of, is that I own a media company and have a huge responsibility to use it for positive change and for amplifying things that are aligned with our value system. And I think that there are times where I could have been closer to that value system. But alhamdulillah, for so many of us around the world, October 7th, as negative as it is, was a self-correction where it said, hey, what do you really give a shit about? What do you really want to focus on? What do you care about? So yeah, I think that's the thing that probably keeps me up at night.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's huge to be able to speak so openly and frankly about that change and to understand the responsible position that you hold and the impact that you hold and the ripple effects of that impact of the journalism and the stories that you're telling. Yusuf, where do you see Scene TV 10 years from now, or the legacy that you would like to leave?
10 years from now, I think we reach 1 billion people every single day. I think we are a reputable media brand. We are able to have a streaming platform akin to a Netflix, a 24-hour live stream akin to a CNN or Fox or an Al Jazeera, the world's largest human experience library of lived experiences, of millions of people being able to share their realities on the ground, assisted by storytellers and technology. And I think that has the potential to bring attention to the most important things at that time, be it Islamophobia, be it climate change, be it whatever is important to be spotlighting at that moment in history. That's where I want Scene TV to be in 10 years' time. I want it to be a household name as a trusted source of factual information at a time where we really can't even trust our own eyes anymore.
Fantastic. And I really do hope, inshallah, that you get to see it there and even bigger than what you've dreamt of. Yusuf, as a last ending for us, can you finish the sentence for me? Storytelling at its best is.
The closest version of reality.
Perfect. Yusuf Omar, thank you so much for joining us on air today and for that generous conversation. What comes through is a very fierce belief that stories can change systems when they're told by the right people in the right way. And I think Yusuf has reiterated for us that the power and control is within ourselves to be able to hold our own agency, but also to control not just how our narratives are told, but where it's told. And this is something we need to understand, the power that it holds behind it. To all our listeners, if today's episode inspired you to pick up your phone and to tell a small true story, start there, because change is often made with small, steady acts of truth. Yusuf, thank you so much for joining us on air. And this is another episode of Beyond This, because what comes next starts right here.